Okay, thank you. So listening to Drew's last turn and reading sort of between the lines, I believe that the point he's trying to make is that this system would be open to abuse, and it could lead to very undesirable outcomes such as, doctors actually essentially murdering patients by not respecting their consent, or, using the pretext of euthanasia to kill people who perhaps have not actually offered the necessary consent. And I would certainly concede that those are very important and real concerns. And so obviously any social policy designed to implement physician-assisted suicide would necessarily have to have extremely strong protections in place to ensure that no such abuses of this nature could occur. And the examples that you gave are certainly disturbing, but I would argue that these are sort of, like you said, these are cases of a system being abused, not necessarily problems with the policy, be problems with implementation, right? Exceptions that prove the rule. Now, obviously, in the case of something where you're terminating life, we can't have even one thing like this happen, right? We can't have any percentage of, murder happening under the pretext of euthanasia. So obviously, I could only endorse such a system under the assumption that it could be rendered essentially immune from such abuse, which I do believe would be quite possible with the correct social policy in place. So again, you'd have to just make sure that, multiple independent expert, investigators in there to talk to the patient, talk to the doctor. Everything was videotaped and recorded and reviewed, and done to the strictest possible standards of ethics and so forth. In which case such abuses should not happen. But I do want to acknowledge that, we would have to proceed with extreme caution and care, use fail-safes and safeguards and reviews to make sure that this was essentially impossible for these kind of abuses to happen. Now, you mentioned that, okay, suicide is something people can do themselves. They do it all the time. There's lots of ways they can. Well, that's certainly true, right? Suicide is one of the leading causes of death. People kill themselves all the time. Unfortunately, many of those ways are gory and violent, messy or traumatizing, illegal or dangerous in some way to other people. For example, depressed father, girlfriend leaves him, shoots himself in the head. Little toddler child lives in the house too, finds his dad that way. Child is fucked up for life. And then of course you have, as I said earlier, the people fail suicide all the time. Actually, I think, more than half of suicides are failed attempts. And so people, cut their wrists in the bathtub and bleed and bleed and bleed, and they don't die. They go through horrible trauma as a result of this, and they're unsuccessful. Or as I said, they impulsively take the wrong chemicals or the wrong drugs, and you have some horrific death from poisoning or end up with brain damage and blind, but you're not even dead. So these are all the kinds of horrible outcomes that happen when we trust people to, quote unquote, just administer their own, simple suicide. In other words, it's not actually as simple and easy as you might imagine. And botched ones are more common than you'd imagine. So suicide should obviously be extremely rare and only in these desperate situations. But when it is going to be done, it's better essentially for it to be successful than unsuccessful. And so that's where a doctor and his expertise comes in. And, the reality is that you are a very intelligent person, Drew. But as you know, the actual intelligence and competence of people varies greatly. Not everyone is so smart, and things that seem like common sense to us are just simply not known by people, right? So they do horrible things to themselves, thinking this is going to be like a painless death. And so there's all that involved, as well as, let me just think of what I was going to say. Right. So, the only real my point is this is more benevolent, it's more compassionate, it's safer, it removes the stigma. And when I say safer for, other people, right? The families and so forth, as obviously suicide cannot be safe. But the only sort of counterpoint I'm aware of so far is the potential for abuse. So then I would argue, okay, there's all these desirable outcomes that we want to achieve from euthanasia. And there's also negative outcomes we want to avoid. That's sort of the case. Any social policy. So I would say we do this carefully. We do it with strict controls and protocols of review, but we do indeed do it. And then we achieve the benefits while avoiding the legitimate concerns that you've raised. And I'll yield my time.
All right, you have 3 seconds left. And now we're going to go to part two of round two. Drewish, are you ready?
Sure I am.
Okay, then I'll start whenever you start.
You're talking like stigmatizing suicide is a bad thing. It's a good thing. There are honor cultures where suicide isn't stigmatized. In fact, it's sometimes encouraged. And yeah, the rates of suicide there are higher. Go figure. If your goal is to actually reduce people committing suicide, which seems like something you want to do, you don't like the fact that people kill themselves in desperation when they don't know that there's help out there for them, yes, then making suicide something people feel repulsed by, feel guilty about, worry about the people they'll leave behind. Yes, that's a good thing. We don't want suicide to not have a stigma behind it because we want those people to seek help rather than killing themselves. Like, I don't know why that seems like a good thing in your mind that we should remove that stigma. And you were comparing an ideal to a practical. All the cases that I listed are real. And I just posted 2 more things. One about, Brazil is someone who's just from this week, like no underlying health risks. 13% of people who take advantage of assisted suicide, nothing physically wrong with them. Okay. But, maybe they have some mental issues, but counseling, the whole point is to try and help these people, but we're giving them an out and say, yeah, you can kill yourself. That's a conceivable out, and we don't want to discourage that as an option. Instead of giving these people the help they need. And the other article I just posted was about a woman in her 20s who was sexually abused and given assisted suicide as a way out. Like, what is this doing? This is compassion. This is compassion saying we're not going to help you. We're just, hey, yeah, we're going to help you. We're going to help you kill yourself. Okay. Except you're not actually killing yourself. Someone's doing it for you. Okay. Because so I know that it's being sold as compassion, but I don't believe it. A lot of things are sold as being compassionate. And then what's the end result here? What's the end result? Is it giving people any special rights that they didn't have before? I can kill myself. You know what? If I kill myself and I fail, I don't go to jail for that. I could be committed to a mental institution, but you know what? I could be committed to a mental institution right now by a physician for no reason. The same physicians that you would then want to give the power to kill me legally. Like, I mean, yeah, some people aren't as smart as other people. Some people aren't as wise as other people. But I think people should have the right to decide these things for themselves, only for themselves, and that means no coercion. That means nobody else pulling the trigger. Some people might want suicide to be more comfortable. And you know what? That's fine. The fact that like opioids and all these other medications that we give to people, okay, when they're committing suicide, they can't get on their own. If you want to make suicide kits, if you want Dr. Friendly's kitchen home suicide kit, make it available by prescription or not, that's fine. Give people the power and means to take their own life if they want, but they've got to do it themselves. They've got to be the one to do it themselves because you cannot prevent abuse otherwise. There's no way to prevent it. And you can sell this compassion all you want, but I think the stigmatization of suicide is a good thing. I think wanting people to seek help first rather than thinking that there's a way out that way. I don't want people to take that way. I can name, a cousin of mine, a good friend of mine. I've known people who've taken their own lives. This is not something we want to encourage. This isn't a good thing. And people who are at the end of life care, we say, oh, well, these people, I just read you an article where the doctor was saying, well, does she really want to live the rest of her life with this tube in her stomach? I'm just going to have her treat her symptoms, sending her home, not telling her that was basically a death sentence and assuming that she knew that. Like, he admitted that he was basically doing that in the article, that he was basically making that decision for her, because he didn't bluntly tell her, if you go this path, you're never going to eat again, you're going to die. And these physicians are making these decisions thinking they're being compassionate, thinking that they have the right to decide for other people because they don't respect their autonomy. This is not improving people's autonomy. It is not giving people greater rights over their own life. It is taking it away, allowing doctors to play God and killing us while thinking they're doing us a favor by doing it. I yield my time.